Welcome everybody in this, Odorama. We're seeing if people, so this is everybody. Welcome everybody at home, not only in the Netherlands, not only in Europe, but we also have a big audience in America, especially in Los Angeles and on the West Coast. Welcome. I think it's now about 11:15 in the morning, so hope you had a good night's sleep. Here it is 8:15 in the Netherlands, and we're very glad to be part of the Scent Week of the Institute of Art and Olfaction in California. Oh, I wish you luck with all the forest burns and all the dust and all the smoke that you're in at the moment. Probably, hopefully, it will become better weather also there, and that there comes rain. Today I'm going to present the Law and Odor issue of the Odorama. Odorama is a series of lectures here at Mediamatic in Amsterdam, and we organize evenings around smell. It's an olfactory tradition here to do these evenings, and we invite always scientists and artists that deal with smell to present their findings and the projects that they do, and we send around to everybody who is watching from home scent packages. We will also be sending this to America. The problem is now that the post is not so quick, so if you're in America and you haven't received a package like this, it's on its way. And if you didn't order a package yet, you can still do. This evening will be put online. You can watch it back for free, and you can buy a scent package. It's about 12 euros, I think, and we'll send it to you right away, tomorrow or something. And then you can wait until it arrives, and you can smell all the smells that we present here today in this kind of strange odorama. I didn't expect it, although I could have thought that it would go into a smelly direction, putting the Law and Odor Odorama up, because it is about law and it's about bad odors produced by either crime scenes or factories and other smell producing companies. This is me. Oh, exit. I present this evening today. So what we're going to start. Oh, I want to tell you something at home first. If you have this package, you have to cut it open on both sides. I will try. Oh, can you help me? Can you please hold the microphone while I open the package? Some things will leak and spill out a bit. It's a bit different, the package, than normally. Maybe when you come to this red part, avoid opening it yet. So that's one side, and you see the white parts of the blotters you can pick. There you can pick them out. Oh, avoid this bloody thing a bit, and so open the package. Some of this will fall out. Try to keep it in. And we'll start with the first ones. Yeah, thank you. And here in the hall you all have them. It's just small straws. And we count down. This is the start of the Odorama. I would like to make it a bit into a crime scene environment here. This is the gun of Jack the Ripper. And so when I count down, we pull this and we will smell. Don't mention the sound. There is a sound, but it's not about the sound. It's about the smell. of the gunpowder. So you have to keep hold of the straws. There we go. 1. Oh, at 3. No, I count down. At 0 we do it. Okay. 3, 2, 1. And smell. So this is what you would smell at a crime scene. Not when you're shot dead, because then you cannot smell anything anymore. But after, when you enter the crime scene, you will smell this. We get other crime scene smells later. But first, this is for the people in California. I did some research, and there is one factory in California in the small city of Urbandale, and that produces this worldwide well-known sauce. It is a chili sauce, and this is the brand. I can advise everybody to buy it. It's really tasty and quite hot. It looks like it's not from California, but they produce it there. They use yearly 4.5 million kilograms of chilies, and the people of Urbandale were not amused, to say so, because this factory produces a lot of fumes that causes headaches, coughing, and sore eyes for the people at Urbandale. And they started a lawsuit. There, maybe you even live in Urbandale yourself, and you have expected, if you had these sore eyes, and you did cough, not from the fires there, but from this factory. They started a lawsuit, and after a terrible fuss, and they dropped it again, because they got friends with the factory, the village of Urbandale, and now the mayor visited the factory and was very friendly, and the guy there that said, "You should have come first here, we could have talked about this," and then nothing happened, but they dropped the lawsuit. So that's also a way to get rid of a lawsuit, is be friendly to a small village. And this is another example of smell and crime. You're being handed out a blotter. When you're at home, take the number 2 out. This was a project from Dutch. The Dutch OM, how do you say OM in English? The Justice Department of Zwolle, a city in the Netherlands, and they asked a company to make for them the smell of an ecstasy lab, so people could experience the smell before they would smell it in their street. So when you smell this anise-like smell in your street or somewhere in the land, you can almost for sure know that there is an ecstasy laboratory close by, and then they want you to call the police. There's no phone number on the bottle. No. It's on the blotter. You can call 0800-6070 or another number 0800-700. So for an anonymous, or the last one is if you want to tip anonymous, and I would suggest to do that, because the people that produce ecstasy are not always very friendly to people that call the government. And there is another. Well, this is another example, but I want to tell you a tiny bit about perfume and law, because of course there is big companies that produce perfumes, and there is smaller companies that copy these perfumes. And there have been lawsuits about protecting smell, and it's very hard to do so, like the ownership of smell. But there was in France there was a lawsuit, and in the Netherlands there was also a lawsuit about copying of smells. And the interesting thing that I thought was interesting is that in the Netherlands the lawyer considered it to be ownership, like ownership of an artwork. And in France, they did not consider it ownership of an artwork, but they considered it as a craftsmanship. So in France, it's not. Perfume is not an artwork, and in the Netherlands, perfume is an artwork. So also, it's better maybe to go to the Netherlands to produce your perfume than in France. This is another thing. We always think that dogs are very well trained to smell stuff, and they use dogs to catch people that commit crimes, and also they use dogs to sniff people. But in fact, and we always think that we cannot smell that well, but we humans are very well. We're very good smellers, even almost as good as dogs. When you make a small trace, a smell trace, that dogs would follow, people can also follow that. Very good. And what they discovered in a Swedish research, they let people see films of crimes, and they let them smell samples of armpits of people, and they also let people see neutral films. So you could see either a crime film and you smell armpits, or you can see a neutral film and you smell armpits. And later on, they placed a lineup. They made a lineup like this, where people had to smell the armpits of the people that. Well, one was the one that did it. And they could really do it very well. Right after they saw the film, they were very good at pinpointing who did it. And especially when it was the crime films, they were very good at it. They did it a week later, and then people failed. So you need to be very fast with this smell research after a crime scene. But in fact, it can work. So also the police should do this maybe more often to find people after a crime scene. Okay, so we go now into the talks. First of all, I will let you smell a product of myself. It is an attempt to create the smell of iron. So blood is always associated with iron, and I did my best to make an iron-like smell. It's number 3 for the people at home. Number 3. It says iron smell. Fruitig, fruity. Maybe it became less iron than it was when I made it last week. Not so rusty. Well, we have a better iron. Well, not better iron. We have a better blood smell later on. If you have this package, you're already anticipating on it, maybe. But Gwen will first tell about her research. She's a multidisciplinary artist and a writer, and she was connected here with Mediamatic at the dinner, a neo-futuristic dinner that she will tell us all about. I will not steal your thunder, Gwen. Come to the front. Give her a warm applause. And there you go.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks that I could give this talk tonight. So tonight is a evening about law and odor. And I have been asked to tell something about my work because I've been involved in research about blood multiple times. And blood is, of course, something that you can't dismiss if you're talking about law and crime scenes, I think. So I thought I'd just take in a chronologic way you through the different projects I did about this and tell you something about it. First one I did, where I want to talk about, is a blood sausage I made. So as a performance, I made a blood sausage out of my own blood because I was curious in exploring what that would trigger with other people and with myself. And because I thought, why is it super normal to consume animal bodies all the time and use their blood while they actually suffer for this? And is it really weird if I take a little bit of blood for myself that didn't harm me, because I'm still alive, obviously, and make a meal out of that? So I did that, and what is funny to tell maybe is that it's really easy to order online everything you need in for surgeries. So everything you need in the medical world is like, it took me 5 minutes to order donor bags, puncture needles, but I could also order like scalpels and saws and I don't know what, a lot of weird stuff from it. Like, and I was thinking, like, maybe if there are more people who order this for weird do-it-yourself experiments, like, is it like I didn't even needed to write my full name down? So that was kind of weird. I wanted to, but yeah, because this is a night about law, I wanted to mention only, then I go through the next project, that for the blood sausage, I contacted a lawyer to ask, or it's legal actually to cook with your own blood, and there was not a concrete answer on that, because like cannibalism is not really in the law. Of course, it is not allowed to kill somebody and eat him, but and it's also not allowed to eat a dead person. That is desecration of a corpse. And eating from a living person is in some cases mutilation. But what if you have permission? I wondered. And there was actually, maybe you know this case, there was a man once in Germany, like in 2001, he put himself on the internet asking for people to eat him, because that was his biggest dream. So he actively went online to search for somebody to eat him. And somebody thought, wow, amazing, I'm gonna do this. So they met, and they first cut off his penis together, ate that together, and then the guy who wanted to eat this man ate him indeed, like his biggest dream come true. But it doesn't matter in the law, apparently, if you give permission for this, because this man is, his name is Armin Meiwes. He was sentenced to life for this. So yeah. Anyway, the sausage turned out fine, and I ate it and a bit. And then later I was asked here, I think because of this project, to make a dinner. Let me see. Oh. Yeah. To make a dinner about self-consumption. I did this together with Christina Sika. She's another artist, and Bryce Steba, he's a cook. And we dived into the possibilities to make a dinner about self-consumption. So here you see, for example, a girl who is catching her tears with eatable paper, and we use this to salten our bread with. And oh yeah, this was thing we did, which is about the blood part. So we gave people the opportunity to draw their own blood and to put it in their meal. So actually, when we were planning this, we didn't expect that there would so many people enthusiastic to do this. We thought, okay, maybe 2 people are going to do this, but almost everybody wanted to have their own blood to put on their dishes. I have a photo. This is the video where we explain how to draw blood from your own body, because it's not legal to take somebody else's blood and use it for other ends than medical ones. So this is a meal we had. You see here like the tubes with the blood in it, and people could throw it over their asparagus. I think this course was called Asparagus Blood Bath. And the funny thing is that, well, people were so hyped to eat their own blood while they were sitting there, that I remember that one girl, she was like, she regretted that she didn't take her own blood when she had the possibility. in the room we had for that. So she even started cutting with a knife her own fingers to still put it on the asparagus. So yeah, it was really interesting to see that people were so hyped about it. Yeah.
This is the moment to open the package.
Yeah.
And also for the people here in the audience it's only to smell. Well, if you want to eat it, you can eat it. It's liver. So this is what we think comes. Well, the strange thing is when you cut yourself, blood doesn't smell that pungent, does it? I never smelled I tasted it and it tastes a bit irony, but when you smell it, it is quite odorless, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this smells like iron. Be careful, people in America, if you get this package in a week or so, maybe not open it or do it in your backyard, garden. This is the liver smell. Who loves the liver? Who eats liver quite often? Tom, you're a liver guy, or if you're in a restaurant, you'd like to order liver.
Alla vill lite grann, yeah.
So there is a distinct. Oh, you're playing a bit with it already. Does it invite to play with? You are allowed to fumble it around a bit.
I wanted to slide this under again. Put it on.
Oh, okay. So, did you like the smell of it?
I'm not sure.
No, it's a bit. Well, Mediamatic is also a vegan restaurant, so don't eat it here, I think, but only smell it. It's pig's liver, and we will compose it afterwards. We don't throw it away. It will not be in the meals of Mediamatic. Did you smell it yourself?
No.
This is horrible.
Yeah, it's really smells really like blood. Yeah.
It smells really like blood. Yeah. So this worked much better than the other one, than the iron one.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Well,
continue,
the other
please.
one was quite fruity indeed. So this was super cool to do, and thanks for the opportunity again, Willem. So we were really happy with doing this dinner. And then after that, I think I just have a fascination for the body, basically, because I didn't have enough of the blood stuff. So because I was interested, I decided to go with a crime scene and biohazard cleaner for a few times. They're called Frisse Kater. And I think the next photo is, this is a nice photo. So I decided first for an article I wrote, advice to describe their business in a piece about them. But of course it's also really interesting, since this night is about odor, to say something about this, because it was for me the first time in my life that I really was confronted with the smell of people who have been dead for a long time, because this company they are invited to clean at the moment when there's a lot of blood or human juices involved, or feces or semen, stuff like that. So they clean the extreme cases that no other cleaning company actually cleans. So I saw quite some interesting things. For example, this is how mattress looks if you stay there months after you died. This is also an interesting thing. I wasn't here, but I thought this night is about odor, so I should tell something about this. This was one case they had, one client, the owner of a house who rented it out to several people, got complaints from people in his flat that there was a big odor. There were a lot of complaints about the odor. So then the Frisse Kater was asked to go there and clean it, and apparently there was a guy, his toilet didn't work anymore, so the guy didn't mention it to anybody, but he just decided to still use it until there was 120 kilos of poop in his bathroom, which is kind of extreme, I think. And the Frisse Kater was asked to clean this all. So that's things that they, for example, had to do. This is another thing, scene. And then I made some poetry and photography about those places, because in the environment, in the rooms where those people where these people were found, you had a lot of really things that were really about life. I thought it's beautiful in a poetic way, like that in this environment I would find a blanket that says elegance, rhapsody, luxury, lifestyle, and then the room would be not so good, of course. Like, or I found somewhere, I helped up cleaning a dead lady who was lying there for months already, and the last thing she drank was this vivid good morning. Apparently it was next to her, and I think the contrast in those things are really interesting, that like this cheered up good morning vivid, and then she's lying there for such a long time already. Like this, for example, I also found next to somebody. And then I thought, and I wrote some poetry about this. So I translated one poem. I wrote several, and they were published at the Gids. That's how do you say that? Literary magazine. Yeah, thank you. I want to finish with a poem about these experiences. And this one is called Thank You and Goodbye. So the whole project I'm doing with this company is called Thank You and Goodbye, in which I make video fragments and photos and prosa and stuff like that. So thank you and goodbye. Thank you and goodbye. Trauma and biohazard cleaning is written on the bus I'm in. Professional cleaner and disinfection of areas contaminated by blood, urine, semen, feces, or other liquids. As if nothing happened, is our slogan. I drive to a house where an unnoticed death has taken place. The police have already removed part of the body, but taking everything away is difficult 2 months after you die. That's why I clean up the rest. Shuffle corpses, the boss calls it. In my blue plastic shoe covers, I get out of the car and walk to the front door. Tessa, her name is on her doorbell, ate ready-made fried rice, contains 578 calories before she died. She also bought 3.5 liters of Schultenbrouw and Vivid Good Morning that day. I read that on a receipt from the Dekamarkt, which is on the table next to her. Helped at cash register 30. She received 1 stamp. Thank you and goodbye. If I died today, I would eat Dr. Oetker pie with 0.6% strawberry powder. How can someone lie undetected in her house for 5 months without anyone caring? Asked the boss. I nod. Then you really notice that the Netherlands is one of the most individualistic countries in the world. And shuffled Tessa's remains into a garbage bag. The 5th shovel comes with a letter saying, "We invite you to the neighborhood party next week." During the neighborhood party, Tessa was dead, lying in her apartment. But that's okay, because she didn't want to go anyway. I can see that in how she has sealed her windows with garbage bags. People who seal windows with garbage bags don't go to neighborhood parties. And that was the last thing that I want to say. Like, the owner of the Frisse Kater told me that he was really surprised, and he sort of, with the media that's involved in what he's doing, he also wanted to have some sort of open call, because he was really shocked, and I was also actually really shocked by the fact that there are so many people lying dead in their apartments for months without anybody noticing. So he said to me, like, and I say that to you now, if you didn't hear anything from your neighbor for a long time, just knock his door and check out or how he's doing, because that would make the world maybe a bit less lonely for those people. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwen. So I have a question for you. You have to answer it through the microphone if you want to. Is it on still? Yes.
Yeah.
what is your? How come that you're so interested in blood and in crime scenes and in horrible smelling places?
Yeah, well, since I was a kid, I was always really interested in everything that's really gross. I think that's just like, I was always keeping dead animals under my bed, hide for my mother, because I was so interested in how they would like change.
Yeah.
But this whole question is a thing we were also talking about during our dinner, because I'm not the only one who is thinking this is interesting, because this company, the Frisse Kater, they have a really big YouTube account and an Instagram, and it's really, really popular. A lot of people are checking it out. Apparently a lot of people are fascinated by this too, and yeah, I was also wondering, like, why is that? Why do we want to know? Yeah.
It will be on national TV. Yeah, it is airing. Ah, and do you consider these people artists when they live for 3 months in there? They're creating an artwork, or is that too much? Is it my fantasy?
That is a funny way to look at it. Maybe you have to be alive at least to make art.
Yes, is that true? And also
sure.
the animals under your bed.
Yeah.
They were also becoming...
Yeah, but they were my project. I was
that was your project.
Managing that.
And these people are not your project. You just find them and write beautiful poems about them.
Yeah, I think so.
I can't imagine that there's no people having questions at this point. Do we have people from California? Don't be so shy, Californians. Can you please ask a question to us? It takes maybe a while to get here. We have a room full of people. Do we have questions here? Maybe somebody about the blood, maybe you? What do you think about smelling blood?
Well, actually, it kind of reminded me of the smell of menstrual blood. So I was wondering if other women kind of had that association, and because I found it interesting that you were sort of so surprised about the smell, and I thought, yeah, I think we all know.
As women, yeah, it's a thing you smell every month at least. Yeah. Is it different, normal blood from menstrual blood?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because when you were talking about the finger and you don't smell that, I was also thinking about menstruating indeed. That's something
so
you do
that
smell.
says more about me than about all of you here. How narrow-minded I am, or how less I am in the company of a woman, maybe.
Maybe that, yeah.
How little, I mean.
When she's
more questions? There, yeah. Question from online.
So we have a question from online. Art and Olfaction asks, do you think about the dead people's agency and their right to participate or not participate? Or do they forfeit that when they die?
Yes, so that is something I thought about, indeed. That's why I also don't share pictures of the corpses that I found. I think that's not really appropriate. And I know that the Frisse Kater have also some issues with that every now and then, because they are filming inside those people's houses. And it's sometimes really obvious where it is. So I try to do it a bit less, Obvious, yeah.
Did you get problems with people, or with relatives, or people that?
No, but I think like something like this is is really general, I think.
Well, if it would be my what's this? Blanket.
It's a towel.
Towel, I mean. It would be, I would be dead, so I don't know.
Yeah, would you recognize this if it's your aunt that was lying dead in her apartment for 3 months? So
well, when I went out with her to the beach every summer, maybe, or it would remind me of her. But well, yeah, it's a bit. I don't know.
Yeah,
Do you think that that broadcasting this or this Frisse Kater broadcasting his show will evoke some discussions?
Yes, for sure.
Or do we see this? Are we so strange nowadays that we just see this as vermaak? What do you call it? Entertainment.
I think people find it entertaining for sure, because it's not only the frisse kater who does this. For example, in the USA, you have a lot of crime scene cleaners and biohazard cleaners who film what they are doing. But when I went with Tuchel, the owner of the frisse kater, I also experienced that, for example, he was called by a client, like, do you want to clean up this house? My aunt died, nobody noticed, it's kind of embarrassing, but can you clean this? And then he went there and he filmed everything and he put it on YouTube. And the next thing that happened was that the family, his client, recognized the room and got, of course, really angry. And yeah, that's, I think, maybe the point where it goes too far, because I can really imagine this. Yeah. I also wouldn't want to do that if you hire somebody.
No, to film it all and put it online. No.
To find your dead aunt and then her house on the internet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine. You don't want that.
Well, with this puzzle, we end your talk. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
And where can we find this all online? Do you have a website?
Yeah, you can find my poems on the website of the Gids, and I have an Instagram account.
And an Instagram account, and we can find you also on the Mediamatic website.
Yes.
I think. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I have to clean the microphones once in a while. Because we forget sometimes, but there is still corona levels are up again, also in the Netherlands. Did this one broke now because I sprayed it? Did I break? Oh, I broke it. I'm sorry. No, I didn't. This is our next speaker. I will introduce him. Keep seated or not? No, you can come up. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry, Ton. But I wanted to introduce you. I wanted to tell the people that a friend of me who was last time in the Odorama, he mentioned you because when he was a student, he works for a company that is owned by you, and he was together with other students. They were put into a small van, and they drove to factories, to pipes where there was a lot of. Went out of the van and they sniffed. They all sniffed, and then they went into the van and they checked the wind, and they went a bit further on and they went out of the van again. They sniffed again and they marked it, I suppose, and then they went further and further just until they could not smell it anymore. I'll give you the microphone. This one I cleaned. Which one? Shit. This one. Okay. And we have a small test for the audience here. The people at home, you get a blotter to smell what everybody smells here in the room. You can do this test yourself with butanol. This smells like butanol, number 5. If you get it out, it's number 5. It's the butanol smell. And here we in the room, tell Ton, what do we have here?
Well, butanol is a reference odor which we use to basically calibrate people's noses with. And over here there's a series of glass of little vials with different concentrations of that smell, and we use that for intensity measurements. So we ask people to smell something and then to say, choose the beaker which is of the similar intensity, and that gives you a scale. It's a way of turning a smell into a number, which is what we do all the time.
Yes, and it's also very good because many people wonder how good they smell, and this is the moment that you can test it if you're a good smeller.
Yes.
Isn't it? So we have some. I have a microphone here, and we'll do the test. Can we do it with you, Maaike? So is the microphone? Hello, pay attention to me, please. So this is the Ton. Kom erbij.
Yeah.
Keep the distance, 1.5 meter. So we have a line of glasses here of butanol. One is should they know the order?
It is in increasing order, so the intensity of the smell goes up or down, but it is one after the other.
And do you start with the one that smells the least?
With the weakest.
The weakest. Yeah. So I try it. This is the weakest, I think. No, yeah, that
So
was the test. No, that was not the
You
test.
smell them, and you can say if you smell anything, maybe you won't smell anything with the first one because it's too weak. And this is what we do with all the people who smell.
Did you smell something?
I'm not sure. It smelled like glass.
Well, that's right. There is no butanol in there, so that's correct. You have a very good nose.
I think I smelled something. I'm not sure what.
Mm-hmm.
That might be butanol. We don't know, but
You
when
will
it
find
increases.
Okay. Okay.
Is it
Yeah.
noticeable or strong, distinct? How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's your test. I don't know.
No.
Distinct.
This is
Smelling something is different than describing it, right? Yeah.
well, just the intensity, whether it is faint or distinct or strong.
I think faint still.
Faint,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the next one.
Yeah. I would still not say distinct, but there's.
And the last one.
Okay.
But I think. Ah, yeah, that's better.
Yeah, distinct.
And if you
Distinct.
go on, you get to overwhelming.
Sorry?
If you go on, you get to overwhelming.
And
but
you
that's
faint.
Non-existent.
Yeah. And on what scale is she now? Is she a good smeller, do you think?
I couldn't say because I don't have the. We do this normally with a machine that exactly controls the concentration. So then we know a little bit more. But
Yes.
you can do this as a game.
This
and-
is average.
Yeah.
So if you smell this, you're an average smeller. If you smell this one, the second one, you're quite a good smeller.
If you smell the first one, you have a very good fantasy.
Yeah. If you smell this one, you're a fraud. Yeah, that's to
Yeah.
capture the frauds.
Yeah, we,
yeah.
we throw in blanks to check.
Okay. So you can do this if you're not on what? Oh yeah. Oh, that's well timed. What's happening now, Ton, come here, is that the live stream. Is the what happened with the live stream? Is it the sound?
No, it's fine. We only have 1 hour.
Oh, that's it.
We just need a second to.
Did we run out of time? Oh, Ton,
Already.
we need to be. You have to be swift. America. We needed to restart because we're running a bit out of time and we don't want to have to restart in the midst of Ton his talk. So Ton, I give the floor to you, and if you're running out of time, I have to step in.
Okay, well, I'll try to be brief, but it's not easy. This is what we do. We unlock the power of science. I'm a smell scientist and a consultant. And what we do is turn smells into numbers so we can quantify them. We're going to speak about undesirable and illegal scents. I've started a company 40 years ago and have dealt with conflict odors since. These are big odors that come out of factories and cause a conflict of interest between people. That's why people come to us. Of course, there is a nasty side of smells and there's a good side of smells. And the perfumery and the ritual use of fragrance is much older than the philosophy and the physiology of the senses. The ritual use started way before the thinking about smells and way before laws about smells. So the Egyptians were heavily into smells, and Coco Chanel put it briefly as a woman who doesn't wear perfume has no future, which I'm sure Frank will agree with. Plato and Aristotle thought about the nature and the meaning of odor. I go a little bit into this because if you speak about law, law always has to be about something. You have to understand what it's about. Why has it value for some? And why is there a conflict possible about something? And Plato and Aristotle really thought about this. They said things like, smell is always a half-formed thing, and no type of figure has the proportions necessary for having an odor. So they really thought, what is this? Yeah, okay, that's fine. So it's really interesting to study what these people did, because they of course didn't know what VOCs, volatile organic compounds, were, what the molecular basis was. We have a completely different way of thinking, but they really started to observe and think, what is going on? They figured out that smell was thicker than air, but thinner than water, for example, which is a real scientist thing to say. They also said the unpleasant roughens and does violence to the whole cavity lying between the crown of the head and the navel. The pleasant soothes this region and restores it with contentment to its natural state. So they also figured out that you can have really violent reactions to smell, but it can also calm you down. And that's the link to emotion, which is very important. In between time, there was a lot of people lived in religious dogma in Europe. My talk is very Europe-centric, I'm afraid. I couldn't say whether this is valid for Asia. But when you have religious dogma, the source of truth is divine. You just have a book and you believe that that is the source of truth. The Greek thinkers were the exception. But in the Enlightenment, they recognized that the sensory perception and observation is the source of truth. So if we see something, we think, oh, well, it may be true. So Descartes thought about that, and he thought very deeply about what we see and what we think and what self and consciousness is. So he said the famous thing, I think, thus I am, cognito ergo sum, but maybe it's also I perceive, so I can think. And I perceive, so I can feel. That's more like our brains work. Because if we can't perceive, there is nothing to think about. I won't go too deeply into Descartes. It's very interesting. There's a book about it. And there's a wonderful painting by Frans Hals in the museum here of Descartes, who was then a famous thinker and had his stuff published in the Netherlands because it was revolutionary. He also worked out that there were animal spirits, there were undesirable emotions like wonder, love, hatred, desire, joy, and sadness. So he also twigged on the link of smells and emotion, and also hatred, which is a negative emotion. The real research started in the time when physiology was born. So Pavlov, one of the real famous physiologists from Russia, did a lot of smell experiments. And on the right we see a gentleman called Hendrik Zwaardemaker, who wrote a full book and made the first instruments to measure smell. So he is my oldest colleague, so to speak. He made this instrument on the right, and we won't go into it because there's no time, but he wrote a wonderful book which is still quite readable, actually. A lot of people thought about classification of scents. Aristotle did that, and also Linnaeus did that. He classified all the plants and a lot of other stuff. But also people in Scotland did that. And some of them came up with really good descriptions, not just of it smells like this, but also it smells like you get angry out of it. So the conflicts of odor are nothing new. In 1811 there were more than 1 million Londoners, the cities grew, and by that the smells grew and the conflicts about odor grew. In 1854, Dr. Snow established the link between water and disease. That was a mystery before that. He was an epidemiologist, and Pasteur in France identifies microbial causes of disease. So that immediately made the link between smell and decomposition and health obvious. In 1858, the River Thames was so polluted that Parliament closed. They couldn't handle it anymore. And they decided to construct the London sewers to bring the sewage from the city to the sea and not put it straight into the river. So the water closet was born and the sewer was born, and they're still being used, the old sewers that are from that time. So the big stink was a big event in London. It was the crisis of 1858. Odor regulation in law has a long history. Odor laws are as old as the establishment of written laws. In medieval law, there were restrictions about the location of tanneries, slaughterhouses, and you certainly could not be too close to the castle if you did something like that. In the late 19th century, there was nuisance law. That dealt more with amenity, which is a really complicated legal phrase, but it basically means that you couldn't cause a limitation on the enjoyment of property. You couldn't cause nuisance to your neighbors, and that was revolutionary. That was in the late 19th century. In more modern times, in the 70s and 80s, there was more attention on air quality. So it was about industries causing very large smells and affecting large amounts of people. In the Netherlands and in Germany, that was triggered by livestock. In the Netherlands, even today, we still have 12 million pigs and 70 million people, so almost equal numbers. And of course, the expectations of citizens went up, so it became a political issue. Now there are odor regulations and laws in many countries, including Japan, where they had that already in 1971, in Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Chile, Colombia, and of course also in the Netherlands, and in a few states of the United States. Not in all states, but in a few states they do. So what drove the legislation? Pigs. And that is one of the smells. Frank took the recipe from research done in the United Kingdom in the 1980s. So this is I think 9-component simple pig odor, pig slurry odor. The real thing has more than 150 components, so it is not quite pig slurry, but it's close. It's a pig on a blotter. Later, in the 1980s and 1990s, a lot of other industries became also the focus of this kind of regulation. Waste management and organic waste composting. We started recycling and putting the organic waste all in one place. But also industry, food industry, petrochemical industry, flavors and fragrance. In those times, the factory that made fresh washing odor made the whole sewage plant of Tilburg smell like fresh laundry. And also tobacco processing and all sorts of things. We've done thousands of reviews of factories in everything that smells. Now it's all of the above, but we have improved, like in the country in the Netherlands since 1980. A lot has been done to reduce emissions, to capture the odors, to have better processes, but it's still a smelly country. But we also have the neighbors, because they have wood stoves and barbecues, and in percentage terms, the number of complaints in the Netherlands of wood stoves and barbecues of the neighbors are higher than of industry. So, is odor nuisance a public health issue? Well, nobody died of acute noise or odor annoyance. It's very difficult to kill someone by odor. It's disappointing for Gwen because she is into strong stuff, but you can't kill someone with smell, as far as I know. But nuisance concerns the environmental aesthetics and can trigger health fears. It has a very strong link to emotion. It can cause fear. It can cause acute fear. It can also raise concerns about health effects of things we perceive. It's, after all, our way of working out whether the environment is okay or not so good. So if it smells bad and you don't want it, you get annoyed. The health impact mechanisms are very similar to that for noise. It goes via stress. It is something that is there. You want to go away from it, but you can't go away. You can't withdraw. So noise is regulated to levels that are far below those causing hearing damage. So it is really something that is annoying only. It doesn't cause direct physical damage. And the same goes with odors. But you know, things like a dripping tap, not a lot of decibels, but really annoying. The smell of an ex-girlfriend perfume where you had a really bitter separation can be really annoying. So things like that. Nuisance-induced chronic stress can lead to adverse health effects. So you can get higher blood pressure and it causes
So this is more also about the way you work, you operate.
This is the area in which I work, which is
Yeah.
in conflicts about odor. And I was just wanting to explain, you know, the whole need, why we need laws. So you have some criteria, you have a licensing process, and in that you need odor management tools to provide data. You need some form of quantifying what's going on and saying this is okay, this is not okay. So in the end, you need to reach the balance between the conflicting interests of economic activity of a company that produces something and creates waste smells, and the residents who want to enjoy their property and their life and their garden and their shopping center and so forth without smelling the neighbors necessarily. The role of a scientist consultant is to turn odors into smells. So that's what we do as odor consultants. The role of the regulator, and the regulators are really in the middle. They get attacked by the public and by the industries. They have a tough job. But their role is really to protect public health, to protect the right to enjoy property, to uphold EU law on the environment. There's not a lot of EU law on odor, but they do need to take care of general principles, and to protect the citizens' right to privacy. And that brings me to the case of the government of Spain versus Mrs. López Ostra. It was the European Court of Human Rights where this case eventually went, because this lady lived next to a waste management site, a landfill, let's say, and the government said, well, that's tough. It is as it is, we can't do anything about it. And she went to court first in Spain and to the High Court in Spain, saying the government should protect me. And she didn't do that on environmental legislation. She argued the case, or her lawyers argued the case, on human rights. So she said, well, this violates my right to have a private and a family life. It's the same rule of law that says, okay, the state cannot just enter your house with a policeman. They need an order from a judge. It's that part of the law. So this is a landmark case, and I'm glad that the next speaker, or the final speaker of tonight, knew the case, because she's a lawyer, I'm not. But this is really the essence, that when an unwanted smell enters into our private sphere, that can really create a very strong reaction and can really destroy someone's life if they start to get upset about it, and it is at a very emotional level. And that is why we need laws to protect people, because in the end, law protects people by setting the rules. And I think with that, that was my conclusion. But that's wrong, because I found out by my co-speaker that this is not an EU thing, it is a wider court, but it's very influential. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Warm applause. I have one question about the factory that is here in Amsterdam that produces an awful smell. It's in the western area of the city. Do you know it?
Yes, I do.
Did you research it? It's a kind of a bread dough-like yeasty smell, and sometimes the western part of Amsterdam is really filled with this sickening, awful, horrible smell, and it's going on for years now.
Well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but their name is on the factory. It's Cargill.
Ah.
And what they do is malting of grain. And
yes.
that creates very large smells. And those factories you've got all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And all over the world they cause problems because it's a lot of material. And it's a very recognizable smell. So in spite of having really quite tough laws in the Netherlands, I must say I still smell Cargill in the center of Amsterdam when I'm
Yeah,
here.
and they still can produce. On the other hand, you can also get used to it because it is part of the city smells. The city is not a
Yeah,
city.
that argument doesn't hold. There is a famous case that after the war there was a factory for linoleum.
Yeah,
Voorbouw
smells nice also, I think.
Yeah, and that was completely accepted because it gave work. It was a sign of optimism. It was the first factory to start up again, until people moved in who hadn't been in the war.
Yeah.
And they all started to complain about this terrible smell of linseed oil and linoleum. So, it all depends on the context and the association.
Yeah. Also with the cacao factories.
Yep.
I remember I was brought up in Haarlem, the smell of the cacao factory. It's not a pleasant smell, but it's also not such a horrible smell. It's a smell that is in your youth.
Yeah, that is very difficult to judge for other people. I once spoke to a guy who lived next to a coffee roasting, and that smells really nice.
Yeah.
And he said, well, the bad thing about this, that I never feel like a cup of coffee like all my friends.
Yes, that's true. I maybe he's a bit of an sure.
Yeah, maybe, but it was an unwanted smell, and he has a legal right to be protected.
That's true. Okay, with that we end our part before. Are there questions, burning questions from California? Oh, that was not my intention to say burning, but burning questions only.
So there are two questions. I'm going to ask them both. So first, is a good barbecue or wood oven also be a violation of private sphere? And the second question was interesting. Before we paused, there was a question. There's a lot of othering and xenophobia, and there's been some talk about some homeless and asylum seeker camps, and how can we kind of address that without picking on people with the lack of better term? But yeah.
What sort of phobia did you mention?
Xenophobia.
Xenophobia, yeah. Well, to start with the first question, any smell that is unwanted, but if it's the neighbors, then and you have wood fires, and you think wood fire is really unhealthy, which it is, then the same principles apply, really, but it is for a different reason. It's because you like wood fires. It's not because you have a factory, so a different law applies. But still, you cannot put, the stereo on max all night. It's the same legislation. With the xenophobia, of course, smell has everything to do with territory, with identity. So there are endless examples of people who belong to one group who say, ooh, that other group is really different. and also their smell, terrible.
It's also a bit foreshadowing our later talk, so
Yes.
we come back to that, I think.
Yeah, it's a big theme,
Yeah.
but smell is only part of the problem there.
So we take a break now. I have to address an important thing. That's the urinating. If you can stand up, please use the urinoir. So when everybody is seated and when everybody online is tuned in again, I would like to address the reason why I talk to the Californian people also all the time. That has to do with us this evening being part of the whole Scent Week of the Institute of Art and Olfaction in California. So I thank them very much for having us in their program. And I would advise everybody in the room here and online to reserve a ticket for tomorrow evening. Then there is the big award ceremony of the Art and Olfaction Awards in California. And I think it's free. You can give some money. You can also get a ticket online. So do that. It starts when you're in the Netherlands. You have to stay up late a bit. It starts at 11 o'clock, I think, and it will go on. But you don't have to. Well, you have to sit it until the end through. But if you get too sleepy, you can kind of fall asleep in between. So we continue with our program. I had asked Professor Inger Leemans to be here tonight, but the problem is she went swimming yesterday. The weather was beautiful here in the Netherlands. She went swimming and she woke up with a sore throat, and she could not be here because in case she had corona. I realized that on the film it sometimes looks as I come close to the people that are standing here. I try to keep the distance, but because of the angle it sometimes looks that I'm very close. But in fact I keep the distance. I try to keep the distance thoroughly. So what I did, I asked Inger, Professor Inger, who is a professor at the Royal Academy of Arts and Science and also the VU, if she would agree with recording her talk. So we pre-recorded the talk, and we're going to watch it. And I wish her well. So welcome, Inger Leemans.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we have some time to think about and chat about the history of stinking sewers and canals in the early modern period, because that's what I'm going to talk about today. Stench and the city. And if you've been biking around, for instance, in Amsterdam this summer or before, you might have bumped into these scenes, people diving into the canals and into the river Amstel, using it as a swimming pool. Now, for citizens of Amsterdam in the 17th and 18th century, presumably Golden Age, right? This must have been really a horrific scene and raising all kinds of anxieties, I think. Because in the early modern period, Amsterdam is also called a beautiful virgin with a stinking breath. And we have a treasure trove, you might say, in the Amsterdam archives, the notary archives. And there you will find tons and tons and tons of complaints about the horrible stench of this city. You can dive into that, and you will find, for instance, a complaint somewhere in 1777 around the Keizersgracht, where people are complaining about the most unbearable stench that a neighbor is producing by unleashing his privy water into the gutter outside of their house. And according to this neighbor of theirs, this was really necessary because he has this old privy and that would otherwise run over and it would spoil his house. So that's why he's pumping out the water and the dirt. But his neighbors really can't bear to live with this stench. So they say it's very harmful, it's dampening and rotting everything in our house. And to highlight their agony, they say, yeah, also the plumber that we invited find it such a horrible stench, it's even worse than the stench of a pirate. And so that's just one snapshot, one of the many voices that we can hear from the archives if you go and look out for stench in the city. But maybe before I'll take you there, I would like to make a disclaimer. I only just recently started this research project. Actually, we're building up a large collaboration, a European collaboration about the history of smell, about sensory mining, these old and often digitized archives, to find traces of olfactory heritage. So that's only in its starting up phase. But luckily, I did some previous work, not in Amsterdam, but in Antwerp. I don't know if you ever visited the sewer museum in Antwerp. It's called the Ruihuis. It opened in 2005, and it's a fantastic museum because it takes you on a walking tour through the old canals of Antwerp, which turned into sewers in the 19th century. And you sort of discover this secret old sewer system. And when they opened up in 2005, they asked me to research the history of the Antwerp sewers. Here you see me doing that live with site visits, but also by diving into the archive and reading literature, studying spiders and rats, rat dirt in the sewers. So it was all very exciting research. And in the end, I made, together with a design company, we made an exhibition in the sewers, which are now also visible as a sort of, you can see it on the right side, billboards within the sewers system that talk about the history of that. So today I'll use a bit of that research and make a comparison or shared story about what is happening in Antwerp and Amsterdam in terms of stench and the way the cities try to create some kind of olfactory order in the 17th and 18th century. So and let's dive back in time. And let's look at Antwerp and Amsterdam in the Middle Ages, end of the Middle Ages, beginning 16th century. You see they're very comparable cities, right? They both have canals. The canals open up to the river Ij and to the Schelde, and they have waterways coming into the city. Now, these canals, they were used for a lot of different things. I think that's important to realize, right? They're built as city limits, as a sort of a way to defend the city. The sand that was dug out was used to heighten up or for foundations for houses. Of course, there are transport routes for supplying the city. The water is used for households, but not for drinking. It was too poor for that already. And most of the fresh water would come in either through the connecting rivers or through freshwater barrels brought in by boats. But of course, you could use the water for watering your plants or giving it to the animals, for instance. Then it's to drain all the rainwater in the city, and if fires would occur, of course, this was very handy. So it was a very multifunctional system, which really got into trouble, you might say, in the 16th and 17th century, because both Antwerp and Amsterdam were expanding very fast, and Antwerp, you can see, also started to build over the canals, bridges, houses, and even a church, the Carolus Borromeus, was constructed over the canal. So the canals would start to clog up in all kinds of ways, and also because people threw in dirt, any kind of dirt. So there's tons of regulations, city bylaws that say do not throw in, and then it's ashes, sand, stone, garbage, manure, hay, and even dead animals. And so if you look at those things, you think, oh, wow, what was floating around in those canals? But one of the most severe attacks, you might say, to the city water system was excrement. And people would throw out piss pots, of course. Then they would have different systems of cesspits. And after a while, they started to build privies with direct outlets to the canal, so feeding right into the canals. And that's even worse because if you collect your dirt in the yard, then it has a possibility to sink in a way. So there's a lot of excrement, a lot of night soil polluting these cities, and you see people complaining about it all the time. So this, for instance, is a complaint from 1633. It's two Portuguese merchants who complain about their neighbor, who was also a merchant, and specifically about the unbearable stench that comes from the neighbor's toilet. And it's very, I think, lively wording that they use, that they really sometimes have to flee their house, and that the neighbor who's been ill, and so the suggestion is because of the stench, that he frequently needs to burn fragrant herbs to drive out the stench. So
and we will also be burning after that, to get rid of the stench, some dried herbs, and those are the same that they used to burn at that time, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I did some research about what could be considered fragrant herbs, because in the archive, as you can see, there's a reference to fragrant herbs being used, perfumo, being burned. So there's many different herbs that were considered fragrant and also good for olfactory strategies. And here are references to rosemary and thyme and marjoram, chamomile, fennel, and such. So you could make a pick of these herbs, and they were often used in households to both for good smell, but also for hygienic purposes. Because if you think about that reference to illness, that's very important. Why are the early moderns so sensitive about smell? And I'm sure that people who've been to Odorama more often would know the answer by now. That's because in the early modern period, smell or stench was considered to be pollution, also had a source for illnesses. So of course, bacteria theory as such didn't exist yet, but people were very aware and also very afraid of stench as a way to pollute the body and to create illnesses. So that's the miasma theory that sort of informs, you might say, a lot of the anxieties around stench in the city. And it's also the way they talk about saying this is unbearable. We can't suffer this anymore. The stench is niet te harde, they would say. That I think are also used to indicate that this is a juridical claim, right? People would go to the notary as a sort of a pre-judge, a pre-trial, saying, I have a juridical claim against my neighbor. And this, as of course, everything was stinking, but this is too much. And by expressing or using the words unbearable, I think onleidelijk, that's underlined. I have a juridical claim. So you see that in many of those complaints coming back, This is a leaking toilet complaint. Again, they're talking about it's stinking, it's dirty, it's unbearable, and it's causing, the stench of the neighbors is causing great discomfort also for my nursing wife. So again, an indication for health and sanity. But then there's an extra claim. Stench is also seen as hurting goods and food. And so these people, they're selling beer, and their beer barrels supposedly are rotten because of the stench coming in from the neighbor's privy. So that's 3 kinds of threats all in one, you might say. Or the nose in general, illnesses, and food and goods. For instance, there's a lot of talk about gallbladder. And so if you would live at the canals and have more means, then you could buy this very elaborate gallbladder ceiling behang. But it was considered to be polluted, aangetast by stench, as was silver. So that's one of the reasons that people could make a claim against pollution.
So the paneling
And
was
about
made of leather, of the rooms, and it was gold over it, and the leather was awful smelling.
Well, no, it was even worse than that as I read it. So the idea is that the stench deteriorated the golden and leather material. So really not only made it smell bad, but also deteriorate the quality of the gold leather.
Yeah, so it would be it would ruin the golden wallpaper. Yeah.
And that's also, we'll see that later when we talk about industries. The gold leather industry moved itself out of the city because it wanted a clear and clean environment to produce this luxurious product.
Yeah.
If you go to the Museum Planten Moretus in the Printing Museum in Antwerp, my favorite museum, after the sewer, of course, there you can see gold leather. A lot of the rooms there are still in gold leather.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful, but really dark also. Okay. Well, actually, so there was a lot of stench and were a lot of problems. But the cities really had this elaborate, tried to get rid of that. So of course, no one wants to live in a stinking city. So they had this whole elaborate system of trying to cope with dirt, waste, and stench. And so they had a whole service taking out all the sand and stones from the streets, taking out household garbage, fishing out dead animals, and specifically you would have the beerpachters, the feces farmers, who would take out the night soil, and they would do that at night, evening and night, of course, to cause as least trouble and grief as possible. But still, people would complain all the time that they wouldn't take care, and that all the barrels with the sewer water in it would sort of spill over and then still soil all the pavements and causing new trouble in itself. And so the feces was taken out and it was sold to farmers in the countryside. So there was a whole waste economy, you might say, very sustainable. And then that money fed back into the system because they used it for the orphanages, for instance. So everything they sold by the human feces came back into the city for poor relief. So there's that. Okay, so they tried to deal with it, but it wasn't enough. So for instance, in Antwerp already very early on, you'll see that yearly or by year, they had to clean up, dredge out the canals. And that was an enormous operation, which is also very financial operation. And it's great because in the archives, you can really see, they make the people who live at the canals pay for it. per foot. So the longer or the bigger your house was, the more you needed to pay. And then the dredgers came and would dug out all the dirt from the canals. And there was a super bonus: you could keep the eels that were dug out. So that was an extra extra support. But as you can see, this is very time consuming. It's very costly. And also, many of the systems didn't work. For instance, in the parts of Amsterdam where the poor lived, they weren't at home when the dirt was collected. So there were a lot of problems with it. So there were other ways, of course, to try to regulate. A lot of littering was, of course, explicitly forbidden, and also there were a lot of moral claims to people not throwing out dirt the way we would do that now. The things became really, really troublesome, you might say, when new industries came in, and they posed all kinds of threats to the urban systems, like the fact that they brought in material that could cause fires or was poisonous, created smoke or created stench. So the archive is also, I'm really sorry, I don't have a lot of time to show you all that, full of complaints about smoking and stinking industries, like the brandy industry, for instance, which would vomit out constant steam and stench. And also, they would have pigs outside of the brandy factories to feed the residue. And those pigs themselves were already stinking, but of course their manure was as well. So that meant an extra problem. And also in historical descriptions, you can see talk about pigs that were fed whale bacon, which were also so dirty and stinking that they couldn't even be sold off in the marketplaces. So there's that. So manure and so industries caused new threats, new manure, and again caused a lot of complaints. Now it's not always that the complaints also lead to court cases, for instance. Frank, you will now probably distribute a little bit more sweeter smell. We thought to get you all infested by all the horrible stenches that the archives bring, but then decided not to, or give you a little break by only distributing horse manure. Because one of the complaints I bumped into is in 1762, in which quite interesting actually, an acid factory, a wine acid factory, so balsamico, specifically goes to the notary to state that they do not feel that they are burdened by the immense heaps of horse manure outside of their factory. So they state, okay, actually there's no scientific proof, and we've been here quite a while, and we've worked with horse manure all the time, and our wine acid is just fine. So sometimes stench could be okay, you might say.
And also the horse manure. Oh, sorry. Also, the horse manure is kind of a smell that reminds people a lot of nice things like holidays and festive things.
There's a 17th century research that tries to prove that God exists. He said, well, the fact the horse manure smells so sweet, that's the best proof of God's existence, because God already knew that the horses and people would live so closely together that he made horse manure smell much better than any kind of poop from other animals.
It's beautiful. Beautiful thought.
You can't push that argument, I think.
No, it's good when you pass by a stable to think of that.
Yeah.
So this what we are now passing out is called paracresyl acetate, and it's one of the creosotes. Creosotes are components that humans and animals produce, and the paracreosol acetate has this specific kind of horse manure-like, horse stable-like smell. But only the good, not really the foul component, but more the pleasant component in the smell.
Yeah.
Yeah. You cannot smell it, but I will
Very sorry. Yeah, and I live in Buitenveld, so not a lot of horses walking around here.
No.
So enjoy your horse manure.
Mm-hmm.
But what I wanted to, there's one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit more is, okay, how then further the city try to enforce a more olfactory order, you might say, to this very challenged olfactory system of the urban environment. Well, there were three ways, you might say. At first, they tried to concentrate or say, okay, parts of the city got different functions. And this is for living, and that's for this industry, and that's for that industry. And they try to sort of shift industries or concentrate. For instance, the Tanners Guild around the Skin Street and the Leerlooiersgracht, the Pelt Street. So you can still see it, of course, in the names of the streets. But that in itself created, of course, really stinking neighborhoods. Specifically the Carmore leather, the same Leerlooiers. It's not for nothing that the mills around that were called the stinkmolen, and you would have the stink Elandsgracht. So a lot of the streets and canals got olfactory words connected to them. And it's also, so that the city, of course, blossomed by all these industries. So there was also a large laissez-faire, laissez-passer kind of attitude. If complaints wouldn't raise too high and people wouldn't lobby too hard, then of course there was a lot of industries that just could stay where they are. For instance, the sugar industry, which was supposed to have a lot of stench and smoke. They often could even stay in the inner parts of the city. The Jordaan was sort of used as an, okay, let's push it to that neighborhood. So there's a balance, there's a laissez-faire, you might say, until of course you see people complaining so much, and therefore the notary archives are so interesting also. And you can also see during the 17th century and in the 18th century that people are really getting fed up with it, and they want something different, and they want a city that is nice, that smells nice. So the ideology of the fragrant city, of the city with fountains in it, that really feeds into, you have these heaps of projects that were projected mostly and thought of, and in the end not built, or they were built but they didn't function, with windmills, water mills, sluices, bridges, well, sometimes the craziest projects, and they're all described, for instance, in Jaap Evert Abraham's beautiful book, De Grote Uitleg van Amsterdam. Then you can see this whole series of inventions to try to improve the stench in the city, not really functioning at all. It remains a stinking heap. And that's why in Antwerp, in the end, so Amsterdam just keeps on using also these old strategies. In Antwerp, in the end, in the 19th century, they set up this whole system of covering up all the canals and making them really into a sewer system. A very elaborate plan, cost heaps of money. But in the end, therefore,
Oops,
Hi,
sorry.
Inger. I don't know where to look. Hi. Thank you for recording your talk. I have a question about the last slide in which you describe how these, I don't know, engineers or workers would go into the sewer and smell and make like this careful list of the kinds of smells. So how they would act on it. So why they would do this careful classification? What was the actions that they would take?
Now I think Inger has to type the answer. Is she doing so? She is. One moment.
I think it will take a little while.
Yeah, so maybe it's better to do this online. If you're watching online, you have a benefit now. You can, well, not during the next talk, but maybe just ask some questions and Inger will give answer. Now, hopefully also to you, and maybe in the end we come back with the answer of your question. Or does she have written something yet?
Oh yeah, she answered. They would clear out the sewers.
Oh, they would clear out the sewers. Yeah, there is. You can see it. Oh, it was so technically advanced. It's all going through phones and stuff. Well, thank you very much, Inger. Give her another applause that I don't talk through. Oh, we have to do some swiping. I do it. I know how to do. What's this? I don't know how to do this. Is this true? Yeah. I have to clean the microphone. And I'll keep some distance to our next speaker. Thank you very much. We'll keep some distance. Laura Burgers, you are standing in front of you. You are a lawyer and a researcher at the University of Amsterdam, civil law. And you are the first one for me to ask to present at this Odorama. I dragged you a bit out your comfort zone, your normal work, because your normal work is what?
I mostly work with environmentally related cases.
Yeah, which is also very interesting, maybe even more, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about odor today. But you write very interesting and good papers about all your work, so people can read it back on your website. All the things about environmental law, making the North Sea rechtspersoon, what's a
into a legal person,
yeah,
for instance.
Stuff
Yes.
like that. She all writes about. But now you're going to give us some cases from civil law.
Yes.
Laura Burgers.
And even not only from civil law, but more.
Oh, exciting.
So indeed, I will talk a little bit about some cases, and I entitled this presentation "A Right to Stink, Smelly Jurisprudence." So indeed, my name is Laura Burgers. I'm a researcher and teacher at the University of Amsterdam, and my research interests are two things. I just completed a research project about climate change litigation, lawsuits about who is or who should be responsible for climate change. And in the next coming years, I'll be dedicating my work to the rights of nature that we just mentioned. So indeed, I also, for instance, research whether the North Sea should get its own rights. But that is not for today, because what I will tell you today is closer to my teaching. I'll highlight some legal cases about smell, and I'll take cases, one case from private law, one from criminal law, and one from international human rights law. So these are just illustrative for how smell or odor can play a role in the law. So I wanted to start with this note. It's a bit of a sad note, I would say, an extremely passive-aggressive note of a woman that she put up rather close to where we are now, in Amstelveen. well, this woman is apparently offended by the cooking habits of her neighbors. She is complaining that, she is mentioning that they should comply with all of our laws, rules and regulations, mentioning that apparently the tram going to Amstelveen is called the Bombay Express by some people. And she says, stop producing stinking smells and also stop using stinking incense. And she put between brackets there the Dutch word for incense, which is wierook. And keep in mind this wierook incense, because we'll get back to that later. She also says, enough is enough. And unfortunately, this happens more often. So it was actually rather recently also in the news that there were, here in Amsterdam, some rooms or houses that were only rented out to people who were into Western cooking, but it was not for tenants who like to cook for hours with lots of herbs. Now, just to make this clear, this type, like this, to only rent out to people who are into Western kind of cooking, that is illegal. That you find a smell stinking, that is not an excuse for racism in the law. And perhaps unfortunately, at least unfortunately for a lawyer like me who is interested in legal cases, these two notes did not lead to a legal case. So I wanted to ask this question, does one have the right to stink? And I found another case, and this case was about incense that I ask you to remember. Oh, and I see my background picture got lost here, but that's okay. So this is a case for before the Court of First Instance in Gelderland, in Arnhem. Perhaps you have seen this city. And it was about a shop that sold incense and incenses and how this is called, these etheric oils. So all these essential oils, essential oils. And they were located at first, this shop, at an absolutely beautiful address, namely Hemelrijk. And Hemelrijk is the Dutch word for heaven empire. And clearly they should have stayed there, but they moved to the Bakkersstraat in Arnhem. Now, and somebody who did not like that so much was the upper neighbor of the shop in this Bakkersstraat. Because he lived in a rather an old building, so this shop located there at the down floor, and through all the holes in the floor, there was this constant smell of incense. So what did he do? He hired a research company that also, first he complained, of course, just went to the shop down and said, well, listen, I find this very unpleasant, all these smells. So the shop actually also took some measure, filled some holes, but unfortunately it did not really help. So he then took it further, hired a company, and they made a whole report writing down how bad it actually was smelling. And then he took the incense shop to court. Now, what I find interesting, of course, the law is always a bit dry. Eh? So whenever there's something slightly funny in a legal case, I am, as a lawyer and especially as a teacher, I'm super happy because I can share this is a bit fun with the students. So I hope it's also somewhat entertaining for you. But what I found rather funny were some of the counter arguments by this shop. So the company that had measured the smells in this house of this person had done that in every single space of the apartment, and this incense could really be smelled everywhere, including in the bathroom. So the shop argued, well, listen, they measured in the bathroom, and clearly the bad smells in bathrooms can come from other sources, which was a bit of a weird argument because they had also, looked in all the other rooms. And then they also had another counter argument, namely that they thought that the incenses smelled super nice. Huh? And of course, that was also something that this house owner was not really convinced of. So in the end, the court weighed all the factors that courts do then in these kinds of civil cases, cases of private law where two private persons are opposing each other. And I put all these factors here on this slide. So it's weighing all these factors to see if there's an unlawful nuisance. And interestingly, one of them is also, which is there under 6, the question whether the plaintiff was located there before or after the time when the nuisance started. And this was relevant here because this plaintiff was already living there, and only after this incense shop installed itself downstairs. So in the end, the court said, well, there is a case of unlawful nuisance, but the plaintiff had asked to immediately stop all the sellings, and had asked the courts, so if the shop does not immediately go away, then they should pay a fine every day. Well, the judge found that was a bit too harsh, perhaps, but it said, okay, the shop has 2 months to install all kinds of, to take all kinds of measures to make this smell go away. So they can do a whole renovation of this old building and put some other expensive machines so that the smells are being prevented from going up to the neighbor. However, the shop had already indicated that this was actually too expensive for them. So in the end, I looked at their website today and I saw this a bit sad message that it says in Dutch, because of a judgment, we decided to leave the building in the Bakkersstraat, in the Bakker Street. And we are back at our old trusted address, Hemelrijk, so Heaven's Empire. So perhaps it was better after all. Now, perhaps now we should also distribute this next smell. And this smell what came across the noses of many students who were sitting in the library, the university library in Delft, and when there's a technical library there. So I want you to smell it and think of it, okay, so what can this be? And imagine that you're a student sitting there and all of a sudden, this is what comes into your nose. I see people already suffering a bit. So it turned out there was this, is there something wrong or? Okay, so it turns out there was this man who was frequently visiting the library in Delft, and he would always take off his shoes. However, he had very, very sweaty feet. So this, of course, led to numerous complaints. But this man said, well, listen, there's no rule that says I cannot take off my shoes, so I should be allowed to take off my shoes. And this led to, well, a certain disagreement between him and the library keepers. And at a certain point, they also sent him a letter, and he became even more principled, and he said, well, there's no rule that says I cannot take off my shoes, so I should just be, I can just take off my shoes. And then at a certain point, there were security people that were asking him, now you really have to leave. And he said, no, I won't do it. So that then became actually a criminal case. So there was this person before I find it funny, but before the criminal court, this judge had to think about whether it was really a crime to put off your shoes in a library. And actually, this man was right, because there is a very important principle in criminal law, the so-called legality principle. In Latin, it's also known as nulla puna sine lege. I pronounce this in a very Dutch way, but it means no punishment without a law. So you cannot be punished unless something is written down already in the law. So if there's no law that says something is forbidden, you cannot be punished for doing it. So in that sense, he was right. However, he did do one thing wrong, and that is, if the security person say you have to leave, then you really should do that. Like, it's a crime to not do that then. So he got fined 250 euros to stress on the one hand, that this was only a single event, the judge reasoned, but then on the other hand, it should also really make clear to this person that this should stay a single event. And actually, this case is rather famous. The Zweetvoetenman, Sweaty Feet Man, and it also became the title of a very nice children's book in which key concepts of Dutch law are explained. So if you're looking for a present for your 12-year-old, I think this is really a nice book in Dutch. Now then lastly, I wanted to very shortly say something about international human rights law. Of course, our former speaker also already discussed this famous case before the European Court of Human Rights. And often the rights to life and the right to private life can play a role in cases where smell is important. I wanted to tell you something short. This is just one example because there's many cases that touch upon this theme, but just, well, it's really an awful story because that's usually the case, of course, with the cases before the European Court of Human Rights. It's always people complaining about their human rights. So it's always the most sad kind of stories. So this case of Brandeuze versus Romania, probably I mispronounced this name, by the way, but this person, Brandeuze, was a prisoner, and he was imprisoned close to a waste site. So he was in his room, locked up there, and experiencing very bad odors and fumes coming from that waste site. And in the end, the European Court of Human Rights said that indeed violated his rights to private life, enshrined in Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. And even, and this is even more strong, I would say, it violated Article 3, which is the prohibition of torture and inhuman and degrading treatment. And that is really one of the most strong articles in this convention. So to conclude, do we have a right to stink? Well, first off, experiencing nuisance is not an excuse for racism. Secondly, yes, smell nuisance can be unlawful in private law, as we saw with the incense and shop. Thirdly, as for criminal law, do not try to object to security people. And lastly, the government must protect us from unhealthy smells. Thank you.
Struggling with my microphone. Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much, Laura. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I come. Well, this is 2 meters, I think.
Yeah, on camera, it might look less.
So, thank you very much for this expose. It was really interesting, and yeah. So I explained a bit about the smells we smelled. The first was asphodida, which is an herb, duivelstrek it's called in Dutch. They use it, or it's a mixture of spices. They use it a lot in Indian cooking. And the second was butyric acid, which is a byproduct of microbes that are dealing with fats, and it occurs in cheese, but it also can occur in your shoes when you wash your socks too little, or when microbes start living there. Yeah, it was so. To me, it was quite clear. I have trouble finding a question to ask. What? Oh, there is already a question. Yeah, but first but I don't have. But do you in your daily life are you offended by smells yourself?
I don't think so easily.
And why are judges always so reasonably? That was also a question that occurred to me.
They're really selected to be reasonable. They even have to undergo psychological tests before they can even enter into the school to become a judge. So that is.
Could you be a judge?
I'm not sure. I think I'm too.
Too aggressive, or no?
Too
not aggressive.
Too judgmental.
More a lawyer than a judge.
Yeah, more a lawyer than a judge.
Yeah. A question.
Hi, thank you so much for a very clear talk. I was just wondering because you linked or you started out with the comment on racism, and then But then at the end there is a judgment on what exactly is an unhealthy smell. And I was wondering how that's written down in the law, if there's any requirements for that. Because, racism is sort of a judgment on something, and then the unhealthy is could be seen as a similar thing.
Yes, so the case about, you mean like the Romanian case I mentioned at the end, right, with the unhealthiness?
Yeah, it's the conclusion that the government must protect the unhealthy.
Yes. Well, I think that, so the question, no.
Yeah, you can repeat
so the question was, so where if the government has the duty to protect us from unhealthy smells, should they then not perhaps also protect us from cooking smells from our neighbors, or what is sort of the line there? I think that was your question, right? Yeah, I think I'm not sure. That's my first answer. So there's different criteria that apply in different cases. So to interfere into a private relationship, such as one of a tenant and somebody who rents out, that's something which would go rather far. But whereas with this Ukrainian prisoner, he was of course imprisoned, so he was already under state supervision. But it's a bit difficult to compare the two. But with discrimination cases, so I could not find Dutch cases about Indian cooking specifically, but I did find some American cases where some kind of person who owned his house was claiming that he disliked, in this case, Chinese food odors, and that actually was held against him later in this private law case, because he was said, well, he was actually racist there.
So then it's much more about the context for the smell than about actually the smell itself, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so I think the unhealthiness in the European, like in the jurisprudence of the European Court of Human Rights, it really has measurable health effects. With civil cases, so with private law cases, there you have this nuisance jurisprudence. So I also show these sort of factors that are always weighed to balance the interest of one private party against the other.
Yes, are there questions from California?
So Art and Olfaction asks if there are any other cases she knows of legal fights over scent in civil law, or where to research them. I think they were interested in knowing more.
About my research?
Or where to research.
Oh,
like
where to research?
To do more research on these, one second, other cases over scent in civil law.
Well, it really depends. So what I did is, so there's a database of all Dutch case law, so you can look that up. But that's perhaps not as interesting for people who are not native Dutch speakers. So, but then you can just and there are several databases of case law, so you could also look into other kind of databases of American law, I suppose. But I just typed geurhinder. And then I found this whole lot of cases.
So what's geurhinder in English?
Odor nuisance.
So they have to type that odor nuisance.
I guess so. Yeah.
In an American.
And then I also looked up the case law of the European Court of Human Rights, and then just Googled, or not Googled, but like in that database, search for smells.
And maybe the book De Zweetvoeteman.
Oh yes, and that book Zweetvoeteman is a good one.
A question. Last question then.
Yeah, I was just wondering, why does the moment upon which the plaintiff is complaining matter?
Well, that is, I like that one as well. So it's, imagine that the person is complaining very late. Then there's already an expectation with the smelly person, so to say, that the other would not complain per se. So if it's already going on for 2 years and you never said anything, then that person can have a sort of reasonable expectation that, there's no longer going to be any kind of complaints.
Okay.
I have another question
Oh, now the last one then.
Because what if you buy and you know it's smelly?
Yeah, then you're in a bad position. So these factors, like in a private law case, they have to be weighed against each other. So it's not per se that you always win or lose when this criterion 6 is fulfilled.
Quite important. So I was thinking, if no, she wins because she didn't know, but if she knew, then she would lose, perhaps.
Yeah, then it depends, because like these are all sort of, if one is more strong than the other are become. So if there's an extremely serious nuisance, then perhaps even if she would have known, like if it's super serious, or if she knew that there was some kind of smell, but then it turns out that it's even more serious later on, then she can still perhaps win this case. It like this one thing that you mentioned, like it depends on the circumstances. It's like the key sentence in any private law case is it depends on the circumstances of the case. So it really depends.
And do we have the right to stink?
It depends on the circumstances of the case.
Yeah, pity. I would like a yes or no, but no, that's not the case. You don't give me. I will take my shoes off. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Laura. And then we come to our last smell. How do I get to? Yeah, we have about 5 minutes to, but it goes very fast. I'm really almost done. Only I'm in this. Well, I leave it here. I would like a nice picture. Can somebody put that on for this last smell? Did I send the picture? Well, doesn't matter. We end this evening of all law. Oh, this is the next Odorama. Yeah, leave it on. We end this picture of this Odorama evening a bit as we began, like with the popping of the gun. We ended up with the cleaned crime scene. After all these horrible smells that we had to endure, there is now a kind of nice, pleasant, cleansed crime scene, full of the smells of Dettol. And well, with that, I'd like to end this evening. Hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you will be watching tomorrow evening at 11 o'clock the Art and Olfaction Awards. And we will see you back at the coming Odorama Can You Smell Blue? It is curated by Caro Verbeek, who at that time just defended her PhD. So it will be around her practice and her whole PhD project. So hope to see you next month.